Hello everyone, this is Unspoken Stories, episode 2. This is the official podcast run for the Working with Words publishing module from the creative writing course. I'm a host, Ben. Co-host isn't here today because they are ill, but I do have Rob O'Connor. Say hi.
Hello.
Rob is my tutor for this module. We've got him here for an interview today. Last episode I said it was kind of a Stockholm Syndrome type thing, but we're not going to go that far. Start out, who is Rob O'Connor?
Wow. Straight in with the existential question. Rob O'Connor is a senior lecturer at York St John University, teaching creative writing, creative industries. I've always been interested in books ever since I was a kid. I remember reading fighting fantasy game books when I was about 5, 6, 7 years of age. Oh, wow. Really getting into those, and then progressed through into kind of The Hobbit and Tolkien and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I've always been interested in books. Yeah, I went to university here at York St John, back when it was called the College of Ripon and York St John in the mid-90s. Went away to Brighton for 5 years, worked as a bookseller there, came back to York, got made redundant, and that's when I decided that I wanted to kind of have a change of direction in my life, and I became an academic. So yeah, I did my MA, my PhD, and now I am here at the same institution where I did my undergraduate degree, teaching you good people on this fantastic module.
No, time's a flat circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you studied in Ripon and York. Where did you grow up?
Oh, I was born in Birmingham, but I've spent over half of my life in York at various different points. So I lived here as a child, and came back as a student, and came back as an adult. So yeah, I've now been in York for about 15 years, so I consider it my home. But yeah, I'm from Birmingham, and when I hear this podcast back, I'm pretty sure I will pick up the Brummie twang occasionally coming through.
Maybe I couldn't tell. So do you say you prefer Birmingham or here?
Well, you always have a fondness for your hometown, don't you? And I do like going back to Birmingham, but York is definitely where I will consider my heart to be.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to the city, so there's got to be something about this place that I connect with quite strongly.
So I came from Leeds originally, and I only moved here like 2 years ago, and I still think this is like way better. Again, like, it's Leeds, so there's not many good things I can say about that.
Well, I like Leeds as well. I think it's a great place. But yeah, York has a character, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It's like a whole history to it.
Yeah, history, the kind of old buildings, the old architecture mixed with the new architecture. Mm-hmm. Nothing is taller than the Minster.
That's a very important
law.
detail, I think.
That is law. So yeah, it's a beautiful city, and goes through changes throughout the year as well, which I think is always. I always admire that about the city. It's a very different place in winter than it is in spring and summer.
Yeah. So it's a very beautiful place. And you mentioned studying here, like before, well, long before we got here.
I'm not that old.
What was it like studying here in the long before times?
Well, the campus was completely different. So, for instance, where the Creative Centre is, where we're just next to now, recording this very interview actually, where the Creative Centre used to be residential blocks, and that's where my residential block was. So they were torn down to build the Creative Centre. So that was a bit of a kind of nostalgic moment when I saw those buildings being ripped down. But the Creative Centre is an amazing space. And this very space where we are actually recording this interview, Cordukes, used to be a stone building which was the student union, and had a fantastic student union bar. But I will not go into those stories today. So a very different place. I joke with my students sometimes about it was the early days of the internet and the email, the mid-90s.
Well, it kind of was, wasn't it?
So there was only 4 computers on the whole campus.
Oh, wow.
You had to book in time to send your emails and do your searches, etc. And it was dial-up internet through your phone line rather than Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi did not exist. So it really was a different environment in which to study. You were very dependent on books. Yeah, very dependent on physical kind of articles and books and manuscripts.
So you couldn't just cheat and pull up JSTOR like we all do now?
No, absolutely not. That was in its infancy at best. So yeah, very different time. Quite nostalgic for it, actually.
I can tell. So you're saying this building that we're in now, Cordukes, it used to be the SU before it got torn down?
Yeah, it was a brick building, and it was quite a nice building actually. It had quite a lot of character to it. But yeah, and that's where the student union offices and the bar, and there was a cafe in there as well. So very different kind of campus layout to what you were used to.
Feels like we're on hallowed ground then.
Absolutely.
Like burial ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after you finished studying, you spent 10 years in the book retail industry?
More like 15. Yeah, but 10 years with Borders. Yeah. So I'd left uni in 1999, and Borders York opened that Christmas. I thought it was going to be a job just to kind of fill a bit of time and fill some gaps. Ended up with the company for 10 years and moved to Brighton with them as well. So they became a really big part of my life, and quite an informative in terms of how my career has developed, quite an informative part of my life as well. I learned a lot about publishing during that 10 years. A lot about event management during that 10 years, because I was doing a lot of events for the Border stores I was working at. So really informed kind of what I'm doing now academically in terms of creative industries. And that's really been my way into academia, which is probably not quite the traditional route that most academics take. I've come from a more industry focused direction.
I mean, it's a more vocational thing, right? That's why you're teaching the course that we're on, or the module, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is my role in the creative writing team, is to have a vocational focus and to kind of install that into the modules across the program. So that's a big part of my role.
Well, I think that's kind of necessary, because like most of the modules that I've done so far on it aren't really vocational. It's more just practicing writing skills.
Yeah,
I think this one's really useful.
Absolutely, and I think it's certainly my experience of this module is it's a touchstone for students where they start to, creative writing students especially, where they start to realise what they can actually do with a creative writing degree. That it isn't necessarily just about writing, sitting at home, writing a novel, writing your poems. Actually, you can do very practical things with the skills that you are learning through being a writer. And hopefully that's what this module kind of installs in the students.
And so you worked in publishing, and you did a lot of event management. Do you have any advice for like young publishers like us? This is not cheating, by the way. I'm just a general question.
Well, my experience is, because I teach, my main focus of teaching is the MA Publishing program here at St John's, and I think my main advice is to give it a go. I think people who are trying to get into publishing focus upon, I want to be an editor. That's all that publishing is. And in actuality, there's a myriad of jobs, roles, processes involved in publishing a book that require very specific skill sets. So maybe think outside the box a little bit if you are interested in publishing. Is there anything outside of editing that you're good at? Are you good at recording blogs, for instance? Recording podcasts. Are you good at writing blogs? Are you good at social media? These are all important aspects of what a publisher does, especially in a digital age that we are now facing. It's definitely turning more away from, even though, of course, the printed media is still really important within publishing. There's a lot of digital content now as well for publishers. So, yeah, technological skills, communication skills. Yeah, give it a go. And I've been really surprised by the students on this module in doing Beyond the Walls, in just kind of getting stuck in, as you guys are doing with podcasting, getting stuck in, trying these things out. And also from the MA Publishing cohort so far, the course has only been running for 3 years, and we've had 7 micropress small publishers start off that program.
Oh wow, really? Just
with students just giving it a go.
That's wonderful.
And feeling like they've got the space in which they can actually experiment with that as well. So that's really what I see my role as being within the creative writing team is that kind of encouragement to kind of just get stuck in and give it a go and see what happens.
And there's so many roles you can play. I think you showed this in a lecture. There's like 50 different jobs all just around publishing a single book. And the money goes to so many different places. So there's a job really in every single facet of creating a book rather than just the writing.
Absolutely. Of course, the writing's integral. Yeah. You need to have a good book, but then you need someone to design the cover. You need someone to typeset it. You need someone to edit it to its perfection. You need someone to market it. You need someone to sell it. You need retailers to get it to the public.
You need someone to contact those retailers.
You need someone to contact those retailers. You need someone to get the books to where they need to be. There's so many integral cogs within that machine that are potential job opportunities. And once you're in a publisher as well, you're able to move between different roles.
Mm.
So don't get kind of stuck on, I have to go in with an editor job. I have to go in one of those really sought after competitive assistant editor roles that come up. Why not try inventory? Why not try design? If you've got a good design eye, why not try going for a design job? Yeah, so that would be my advice, is to think outside the box and to get stuck in, give it a go. Why not publish your own anthology? Why not?
You can get enough people. I mean, I don't have the podcast the rest of my life, that last bit of advice. Thank God. Would you say your experience in the book retail industry and publishing, do you think that got you onto the York Lit Festival committee? Because I read that you're on that committee.
Yeah, it's quite fortuitous. So the York Literature Festival started in 2007, and I was working at Borders York at that point in time in an event management role. So a couple of years in, they started to look at Borders as a venue. So I just naturally started talking to the organisers of the festival, found it really interesting, thought it was a great idea, and eventually through that contact, I was invited to join the board of trustees, and I've been on it since 2010. So this is now it's my 14th year on York Literature Festival. It was really small back then. It's kind of grown over that time. Maybe there was 10 to a dozen events. This year we've got 38. The most we've ever had was 60. So it's a festival that just kind of like highlights literature and the spoken word within our beautiful city. And we try and have high-profile authors attend, but also we're really interested in what's happening on the local scene too. Poetry mic, open mics, local authors, community projects. We like to kind of like showcase both sides, really.
Will you still be on the committee or like the judge panel on this year's Lit Festival? Yeah,
so this year I'm the festival director. I'm not on the board of trustees. They've actually, I was about to say they removed me. That sounds like something dramatic.
They've promoted you.
Stepped down, stepped off the board because it's difficult for a festival director to also be a trustee. Okay. So yeah, that required me to come off the board temporarily, but hopefully I'll go back on after the festival finishes onto the board, and we'll see what the next cycle brings for 2025.
What was it like being part of the committee of trustees? Does it involve a lot?
Yeah, it does actually. It's an annual cycle. It never stops. So we're either planning for the festival or we're reviewing it, and then once we reviewed it, we start again. So there's never really a kind of stop point. There's quieter times of the year, but there's never a stop point. We are all voluntary on the board of trustees, so we have to be aware that people are giving up their time to do this. But there's a certain degree of commitment. Absolutely.
Very cool. So I want to talk about the personal work that you've done that I've done some research on.
Okay. Now I'm scared.
Besides the committee. So this has interested me. You have written, and I counted on the page that you put for York St. John, 3 articles, 2 conference papers, and your PhD thesis, all on the one author.
Yes.
China Mieville.
That is correct.
Can we talk about that?
Yes. What would you like to know?
Are they your favourite author? What?
Yeah, China Mieville is an astonishing writer. British science fiction, fantasy, horror writer, quite often described as someone who's writing in the genre of the new weird, and the reason why that category is assigned to China's work is that it's very, very hard to categorize. Each book is very different from the one before. But I'm just fascinated by his work, because what China is really interested in doing is infusing all these genres that we recognize with extreme social and political commentary, which has always fascinated me. And my PhD was on how China was using monsters within his work to talk about social and political issues.
Wasn't it landscapes as well?
Landscapes as well. I use landscapes in different ways within the PhD. Real landscapes, so China's very interested in physical space and how that is kind of politicized, but also kind of theoretical landscapes as well, genre landscapes. For instance, I spend a chapter discussing the way that China uses genre within his work. So yeah, landscapes was used as a kind of rough metaphorical theme. The real focus was on monsters as motifs and how they are being used to talk about all those different kind of social political issues that China wants to explore. Yeah. I mean, I've never known a writer so politically engaged, apart from maybe Ursula Le Guin.
Within sci-fi.
Within sci-fi, within science fiction and fantasy. So explicitly politically engaged. I should clarify that, because of course most science fiction writers are politically engaged.
Yeah, but most of them are like cautionary tales. Like old Philip K. Dick books and things.
Absolutely. Whereas with China, it's explicit Marxist commentary.
We love a bit of that.
I've always been attracted to his work. I think his Baslag trilogy of fantasy books is some of the best fantasy in the past 25 years. City in the City is a phenomenal piece of kind of political, fantastical psychogeography. That's the only way I can really describe it.
A very interesting way to describe it.
So yeah, phenomenal writer that I really engaged with, and I've met him a few times, and his astonishing intellect. Yeah.
Would you say you're his biggest fan?
I don't know whether I'm his biggest fan. I've written about him a few times. I was very lucky enough to write the Oxford Online Bibliographic Reference for China. That was a real honour. So am I his biggest fan? I'm not sure. I don't know, but I certainly love his work, and I certainly love writing about him. As you rightly point out, I've written a lot of articles about China.
I think you mentioned monsters and things like that. I noticed you did a few other articles on monsters.
Yeah.
Would you say you're a big fan of like monster horror, like old monster films?
Yeah, I am actually. Yeah, I do like myself a kaiju movie. I was really excited to watch Godzilla -1, but didn't get a chance to see it. It wasn't on many cinemas. I couldn't track it down in time. I'm not quite as excited about Godzilla x Kong, but yes, I do like a kaiju movie, and monsters have always been a big part of my reading, my watching. I love how they are used as metaphor, as allegory, to talk about other things. I mean, the word monster has its root in Monier, which translates as to warn. So I think people often don't see monsters as just some things that people have to get past, but for me, they're kind of, deeply rooted with commentary.
Oh, of course. I mean, classic Frankenstein, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like cautionary tales and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say you're a big fan of the old, Universal monster movies, like The Invisible Man, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I actually think that Tom Cruise's The Mummy doesn't get enough credit.
Really?
Yeah, I quite liked it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that extended universe didn't develop, because I think it could have been quite an interesting competitor to the kind of Marvel, DC superhero universe.
Very controversial take.
I know. I talk about it quite a lot with my friends, and they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, I thought it was good." But yes, I do like traditional monster movies. You mentioned Frankenstein. I love pretty much every version of Frankenstein I've ever seen. Vampire films, of course. Yeah. Lost Boys is one of the best films ever made, in my humble opinion. So I love that stuff.
So you're a fan of vampires? Do you like From Dusk Till Dawn?
Yeah, I think it's a very specific kind of film, though.
It's so bad, but
yeah, it's so bad it's good. Yeah.
Brilliant film.
What about Twilight?
Oh.
Rachel brought up Twilight.
Books are better than the films. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
Agreed.
We'll leave that there. Who would you say your favourite kaiju is? Because I know there's a lot of them.
It's got to be Godzilla.
Just the classic one.
Yeah, it's got to be Godzilla.
Fair enough.
And I like most iterations of Godzilla as well. I think Godzilla versus Kong is 2 hours of my life I'm never getting back. But outside of that, I pretty much like every Godzilla film I've seen.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much.
Even like the really old, goofy ones.
Because they're just fun, aren't they?
Yeah, they're fun films.
And it's great to see a giant radioactive lizard just destroy cities.
It's all you're there for.
Exactly. I have a similar kind of affection for Pacific Rim.
Because it's big robots fighting.
Just big things destroying cities. It's great.
Underrated film, in my opinion.
Very much so.
Pacific Rim is great.
Very much so.
No, I agree. So, among the other things that you've written, especially with monster stuff, I noticed the word abcanny comes up a few times. Can you define what abcanny means?
This goes back to China medieval to some extent. Basically, it's kind of uncategorizable horror, really. So for instance, the weird is quite often described as a kind of cosmic awe. That weird fiction is about things that we don't have the kind of mental capacity to understand. The abcanny is about, we see it, we perceive it being there, but it has no recognition at all. A great example, for instance, would be, I think the most prominent example from recent popular culture would be the Mind Flayer from Stranger Things. I think it's season 3 where it kind of has this kind of really gloopy form where it steals body parts, and it kind of really fluid, and probably the best example of the abcanny that I can bring to the fore from recent popular culture. So it's kind of a mixture of the uncanny, the weird, but also what's called the abject, which is a kind of sense of repulsion.
There's no recognition. With the uncanny, it's like you're afraid because you recognize it somehow.
Absolutely.
While the abcanny is like, I don't know what this is whatsoever, and I'm scared.
Absolutely, that's absolutely spot on. Yeah, you've processed that really well. But there is this aspect of kind of being uncontained as well, so gloopy. That's how I kind of describe abcanny monsters quite a lot. Is they're kind of gloopy in their form, like kind of indescribable.
Would you say like the works of H.P. Lovecraft kind of tap into that?
Well, H.P. Lovecraft is a weird fiction writer. So for him, it's all about the kind of cosmic awe, and the horror of a Lovecraftian story is that we realize how insignificant we are in terms of the wider cosmos.
It's just we can't comprehend like the enormity of some things to the point where like we just don't understand it and we go mad, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of tentacles. I noticed the word tentacular came up a few times.
Yeah, this is my current research really. It's probably a development of all the kind of monster motifs I was exploring with my PhD and my work on the Avel. I've become very interested in the tentacle and how it's used as a motif within literature, within film. And I think it's probably the perfect, in my mind as well, this is where my research is kind of going, I think it's the perfect motif to talk about really chaotic social and political times. That kind of chaotic fluidity that tentacles have. Once again, we kind of know what they are, but we also don't. They're kind of incategorizable. So they're tapping into the abcanny a little bit as well. And I think there's a lot of kind of texts, novels, films that are exploring the tentacle and maybe the cephalopod, squids, octopus as motifs. And I think it's got to a point where it needs to be carefully looked at academically, and that's my intention with my current research. A
lot of depth to tentacles. There
is a lot of depth to tentacles. I think there's more depth than people realize. I mean anyone who's seen My Octopus Teacher on Netflix and has experienced how the diver and the narrator of that film connects with the octopus that he finds, and the kind of non-human contact that is kind of so beautifully evoked in that film, will probably understand where I'm coming from in terms of trying to expand upon how the tentacle and cephalopods are being examined within media, and the kind of metaphorical understanding we get from engaging with these kind of animals. So that's kind of and I'm also looking at it in science fiction and fantasy as well. So that's kind of my current research. Outside of all the vocational stuff I do at St. John's, I write about tentacles and monsters too.
Well, someone has to,
Are you looking at Arrival?
Arrival, yes, definitely. Arrival will be in that research. Yeah, it's a great film, and the heptapods are a great example of what I'm really interested in with this research. Yeah, absolutely. Good example.
Would you say that H.P. Lovecraft has ruined the reputation of tentacles by putting them all on like indescribable horrors?
I wouldn't say he's ruined the reputation. I think he started off people thinking about them, actually.
Fair enough.
I very much see... Well, saying that, I think there's actually a lot of references even earlier than Lovecraft, but I think you say tentacles and monsters, people instantly think of Cthulhu. There's kind of no avoiding that. So the Lovecraftian influence is definitely there in my research. I like some of Lovecraft's work, but I'm not a huge fan. I think it's definitely a problematic writer, and some
very outdated views.
Yeah, and some of his stories, definitely outdated views, and some of his stories I think are lauded critically, and I'm not quite sure I necessarily agree with that, but thematically he's interesting. Yes, absolutely.
Would you say that old stories like the Kraken, like old like things like that, have contributed to the whole view of like, the social norms of tentacles and like the horror and the abcanny to do with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love marine mythology. It's probably my kind of favourite subset actually of mythology. Krakens. sea serpents, all that kind of stuff.
Very scary stuff, I think.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
definitely afraid of like the sea.
And it's the depths of the ocean, isn't it? It's that kind of, we don't know what's down there. Kind of
thing was, if anything truly alien was on Earth, it would be from the sea. I think
absolutely
that's
it
where a lot of horror
would.
comes from.
Absolutely it would. And I think maritime horror is a really interesting subset. I think one of the most beautiful and terrifying books that I've read recently is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. It's this astonishing piece of work that just deals with this idea of what is down in the depths so evocatively, and I would recommend that to anyone who's interested in kind of the maritime weird, shall we label it that way?
Yeah,
they should definitely read Julia's novel. It's fantastic.
Can you get a brief summary of it?
Yeah, so basically it's about two women, a couple who, one of them is a marine scientist. They go missing on an expedition into a deep abyssal trench, but they come back changed, and they start to kind of show signs. I won't give too much.
Okay,
they start to show signs of the ocean having influence on them. Probably the best way to put it. And it's a kind of dual narrative. We get the character who's left at home. We get their perspective, and then we get the perspective of the other character who on their journey into the depths. So there's some really beautiful scenes of kind of deep maritime exploration and what they're seeing down there. It's a very evocative novel.
Imagine. So moving on from weird science fiction to a different genre of science fiction, you've written, I think, 1 or 2 articles on Blade Runner.
Yes, I have.
What's your talk about Blade Runner? One of my favourite films.
Well, it's just an amazing film, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love the novel as well, Philip K. Dick's novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but it's a very different text to Ridley Scott's film.
It's very loosely based.
It's very loose base, yeah. Yeah, I remember watching Blade Runner probably, I'm trying to think about the timeline now, it's probably early 90s, so it's probably the director's cut when that first came out.
Oh, wow.
And just visually being blown away by it,
Well,
like astonishing visuals, and thinking that it was made in the early 80s. Yeah, and just being completely immersed in this world, this neon-infused dystopian metropolis with Harrison Ford, and who doesn't love a bit of Harrison Ford?
No.
With Harrison Ford just walking through and being a badass. Sorry. Yeah, so absolutely loved it, and watched the film first, realised it was from a source material. I was kind of reading science fiction already, of course, by then, but it kind of really got me immersed into loving science fiction.
Pulled you in.
Pulled me in. I was already a Star Wars guy, but Blade Runner, I think, made me realise what science fiction can really do in terms of talking about serious issues and societal issues. And philosophy, concepts of identity. So yeah, it was kind of a gateway into kind of exploring science fiction a bit more critically, I suppose. Yeah,
because in your article, I think the title was like to do with identity and replicants. Do you think that the whole concept of replicants in the Blade Runner film is like a good allegory for that identity, and explain your thought process about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, spend a lot of time in my articles on Blade Runner talking about the post-human. So kind of looking beyond our kind of physical form and to what human identity could become. And I think the replicants are a great example of that. And also I think what's tied in with the replicants in terms of commentary is really interesting. Matters of race, matters of class and slavery. There's quite a lot there wrapped up in that kind of motif that critically you can explore and unpick.
Yeah, I mean, it asks a lot as well, like, what does it mean to be human in a way? Because, like, replicants do believe that.
Yeah, I mean, in Blade Runner 2049, one of the characters says that replicants are more human than humans.
Yeah, I think that was the title of your article.
I think it might have been, actually. I think that's quite an interesting thing to think about, how a synthetic creates a human identity, and thinks of themselves as being human. It's a deeply rooted philosophical question, and I find those kind of things really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, sci-fi is really good at that in some points. What did you think of 2049 anyway? Do you think it kind of paled in comparison to the first one, or do you think...
Denis Villeneuve is a master. Yeah, I think his films are phenomenal. Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, Dune, can't wait for Dune Part 2. I think he's such a visionary and understands what the potential that science fiction has for certain commentary. I think he's moved away with that slightly with Dune, because he's got that very famous source material that he's dealing with.
Yeah, well, so I think Dune came out in like 65 or something.
Yeah,
like that, and
absolutely.
it sets so many tropes for sci-fi. It's incredible.
Absolutely did. So I don't think he's veering too much away from that source material. But Blade Runner 2049, lots of commentary in that. Arrival's phenomenal piece of work. I go back to that film again and again and so impressed by it.
Mm.
My most recent article was about Arrival, actually. I think he's a master of what he's doing. I think Blade Runner 2049 is a very different film to the first one. And I think that's where a lot of the criticism is misguided, because they're comparing it to the original.
Yeah, it's a different person.
It's a different film. It's different. It's set in a different period of the universe as well. So I think as a continuation, I thought it was very effective. And I thought the character of Joy, kind of holographic companion that Kay has, was fantastic.
No, of course. And they're like big sci-fi, like dystopian universes that you'd say you're interested in besides Blade Runner.
There's that infinite question, isn't it, that people get asked, Star Wars or Star Trek? And I always reply both. It tends to throw people. They're like, really? Yeah, I think there's merits in both. Yeah, I love Star Wars. I love that universe, but I love Star Trek as well. I think it's a really expansive universe. I think one universe that is about to kind of hit the mainstream, this is really geeky, is the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
Oh no, I do love Warhammer very much.
And obviously with Henry Cavill and his Amazon Prime show,
I very much hope that's going to be interesting.
If they do it well, that will be phenomenal. Because so far no one's really been able to kind of get their head around how to do it.
Because the lore is in so many different like split up books that aren't really canon and things like that, it'd be very hard to adapt it, especially since it's just like people pretending to shoot each other with miniatures. Yeah,
well here's the interesting fact for you. There's more written words about the Warhammer 40,000 universe than the Star Wars and the Star Trek universe combined.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much lore, so much material there that they can tap into.
Have you read much of the Black Library, I think it's called?
No, I haven't actually. I used to play the games, which is how I know the lore. But
I still do.
But I haven't read the books. But it's about 60 books now in the series. So there's so much material that they could potentially tap into. So that universe is great. But I do love a franchise. But I like science fiction and fantasy that's like one off, or maybe one or two.
Like a very contained universe.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is. Like creep, like feature creep, things like that. Sometimes it just gets a little bit out of hand.
I loved Event Horizon, quite an old film. That was in the 90s, I think, or late 90s. That was a great film. I really liked that. Very disturbing. But yeah, so I am drawn to franchises, but I like science fiction that's quite contained. Yeah.
So moving on from science fiction, in the research we found that you also wrote some short stories for different anthologies. Sadly, we couldn't access them, but we got titles like Storm, Flicker, Going Home, The Beekeeper, and Dawning. Do you want to try to run us through about like what those stories are generally about, if you remember?
I mean, I would say that my creative writing tends to focus on where my research areas are. So I write a lot of speculative fiction. But Flicker was interesting because that was a really short piece for a Green Teeth Press anthology, which was about a little haunting incident I had in my teenage years, which kind of like shook me a little bit. So that was a little bit biographical. So I do write outside of genre fiction, but I suppose majority of my work, The Beekeeper is a science fiction story, for instance. I suppose the majority of my creative work has that genre slant to it. Yeah.
I mean, you write what you know, you write what you like. I mean, I'm very big on neo-noir, so usually when I write, it's like something like that.
Yeah, I think it feeds in. I mean, my creative project at the moment is a novella about a giant jellyfish that appears over a town. So, yeah, absolutely. So very much, I think when you're an academic, if you're creative as well, I think it's quite natural that what you're researching kind of filters into your creative practice too. You just find yourself writing about these things that you're interested in academically.
Copy from everyone is like the advice that I think gets given out a lot. It's like steal from every place you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Make it, take what's good, churn it around, process it,
make it
into
yours.
your own. Yeah. Avoid plagiarism though.
Just you have to toe the line.
Yeah, avoid plagiarism.
So what would you say your writing process is like when you sit down and you get writing in this creative fiction stuff? Like, what would you say your writing process is like?
Chaotic.
Okay.
I find it very hard to find the time. But when I do, I'm very productive. So I suppose that's where the chaos lies. Not necessarily in the process, but in the structure of the practice. And that's the complete opposite to what I tell you all to do as creative writers, which is get a routine. But as an academic, it's hard to do that.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yes, exactly.
Do you have any advice for new writers?
It can be quite lonely, being a writer. So I think you are all doing quite naturally in your creative writing. You share your work as much as possible, as widely as possible. Yeah. get readers you trust. I mean, I jokingly said in lecture the other day that my wife is the best critic in the world because she has no problem ripping my work apart. And the thing about feedback that I think is really important is remember that it's yours to use as you want. It's not law. You don't have to make those changes, but listen to what people are telling you and really think carefully about actually what they're telling you is useful or not. Yeah, if it's not, fine, get rid of it. But if it is useful, do something with it. I think I find the process of sharing helps me to love a piece more. But there has been times where I've written something and I really liked it. Don't necessarily have an instant kind of pulsion for all my work. But yeah, the feedback process does help me to kind of appreciate my work better, to make me understand that actually, yeah, I can write. Yeah, I'm not kidding myself. I can actually do this. I think confidence is one of the biggest problems that, in my experience, a lot of creative writing students have had. Is like, confidence in their own work and having the belief that they can do it, and that's really hard to get. And the only way you get that is by sharing your work. It's a really strange kind of vicious circle, because if you're not confident, you don't want to share, but you're only going to get confident if you do share. Yeah. So it's a really vicious circle that part of my job, I think, is to just encourage people to come out of that circle and just engage with that feedback process a bit more.
Because even if you get bad feedback, you're still learning something, aren't you?
Yeah.
As hard as it is to deal with sometimes.
Absolutely. And I think actually my biggest piece of advice is consistency. And what I mean by that is to look at your week and go, right, that's when I can write. Turn up and do it. Because that's the only way that you get anything done. Even if it's 500 words a day. If you write 500 words a day, that's 2,500 words a week. That's a short story in 2 weeks. That's how you have to start thinking about things. That's not stressy. You can think of that and go, that's a page.
Yeah, that's manageable.
Yeah, that's manageable. Well, do that over 2 weeks. You've got 14-page, 15-page short story.
Keep at it, you've got a whole book.
Keep at it, you've got a book in a year. So it's about that, and that's that consistency of just chipping away at something. And I know that can be hard. Everyone has a life. Yeah, but it's about looking at your timetable. That's my life this week. Where's the gaps? Can I use those gaps? Do you spend half an hour on a bus every day coming to uni?
I walk to uni, yeah.
Well, yeah, but get a pen and paper out while you're on the bus. It's a profession that you can do pretty much anywhere if you have a pen and paper.
That's good advice.
Yeah, so just to touch base again on the York Lit Festival.
Yes.
We obviously are going to be attending as many events as we can as a blog and podcasting team. What are you most looking forward to this year for the Lit Festival?
There's lots of stuff. I think the Polare Literary Salon is going to be phenomenal. So that's on, I wish I brought a programme now. That's on the Thursday, the 7th of March, I think. God, I wish I had a programme in front of me now. Someone with a calendar, please confirm. That's at Theatre at 41. That's on Monk Bar. So Polare are based in London, but they are an organisation that focuses upon LGBTQ plus writers. They probably have the most prominent literary award for LGBTQ plus writers in the country, the Polare Literary Prize. They run a regular literary salon. It very rarely comes outside of London, but they're doing a national kind of outreach as part of a kind of grants from the Arts Council. So they are in York for the festival. That's going to be brilliant. 4 artists for £10. Following night, we have a poetry showcase, which is celebrating International Women's Day. Once again, 4 poets for £10. That's on Friday the 8th of March at the Basement. I'm interviewing some people for the festival. I'm really looking forward to interviewing Cynthia Murphy on Saturday the 2nd of March. I'm really looking forward to having a conversation. I should say Cynthia is a young adult thriller horror writer. Really interesting books for that genre. I'm really excited to be interviewing R.J. Barker, who I think is a great fantasy author, alongside Eliza Chan, a debut author. It's on Tuesday, testing me out here. That's on Tuesday the 26th of March at a fantastic venue called the York Medical Society, which is, I don't know whether you know where that is, but it's tucked away on Stonegate. It's a fantastic little gem of a building. So that's going to be a great event. I'm also interviewing Sheena Patel. We have Grace Dent from MasterChef, the kind of high-profile food critic, on Saturday the 30th of March, and on the same day as well we have a Lem Sissay, the celebrated poet. There's just so much stuff. It's going to be a great month. There's loads of events at St John's as well. The Folk Horror Day is going to be phenomenal.
So we're going to have some blog writers there to do some interviews at the Folk Horror Festival.
Yeah, that's going to be absolutely phenomenal. There's a afternoon on writing speculative fiction as well, an event about publishing. So there's loads of stuff going on across the whole of March, different venues across the city. Thank you for the plug. Thank you for asking me. Well done.
Including our showcase.
Yes,
the
of
11th
course. How
March.
can we forget that? The Beyond the
make
Walls
sure
Student Showcase.
Everyone comes down, and I will be embarrassing myself on stage. Last year I went to the Juno Dawson event, which was great.
Yeah,
Got to meet
Juno
her
was
afterwards.
incredible.
She's absolutely wonderful. Very excited to try and get to as many things as possible this year.
Great.
It sounds like some really big authors, some big names.
Yeah, Natalie Haynes, the kind of classicist, doing all the kind of work around Greek mythology at the moment. Loads and loads and loads of really great events.
I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Rob. You've been a great guest.
Thank you for having me. That was I feel like it was quite an intense interview, but
Well, it's not an interrogation. We tried to.
but thank you for the questions.
No problem.